Hey everybody, how's it going this week? Well, this week as you noticed, last week I didn't have a video. And the reason I didn't have a video is because on Saturday, about mid-Saturday, I'm like, oh yeah, BoJack came out with a new season. And funnily enough, I binge-watched the first 4 seasons. Like, I didn't even realize it was a real thing, and I don't watch TV too much, even animal shows these days. But I had some free time when I was moving out to the new area, and so as I was doing that, I did find you know on Netflix. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll start browsing around at what some of these things have to offer, and BoJack was there, and I'm like, oh, I've heard some good things about this show, so I was like, okay, I'll start watching, and lo and behold, a few weeks later, I'd already binge watched the entire first 4 seasons. So when they said, well, if episode or season 5 came out, I'm still new to the whole Netflix thing, so I was like, oh, okay, the new season's out, so that means I'll watch the 1 or 2 episodes they have up already, and because it came out a few weeks ago, and then as it kept going, I'm like, wait a minute, what? No, apparently Netflix puts the entire season out in one shot, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, okay, let's keep going. And lo and behold, before I knew it, 2 hours turned to 3 hours, turned to four, and I binge watched the entire freaking thing in a weekend. Not recommended. Don't do that. I don't have a problem. You have a problem. I don't have a problem. I have no problems whatsoever. I have no problems. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. All right. It's an addictive show, in its sense, and it's kind of funny that it's an addictive show since it deals with things like that, addictions and cycle, and more importantly, when it deals with those kind of issues, it deals with cycles of abuse. Interestingly enough, the last video I was going to do last week was about it was going to be about drugs, and I might do a future episode regarding that, but unfortunately something bigger has come up, ironically revolving around the same individual, but that's not going to be something I'm going to be covering this week directly. I'm still waiting on more information, and it would be better to allow the forces that are qualified to be doing that kind of things. I'm small time. I've covered other topics that are controversial on this channel before, but usually when it's more already out on the official sort of things are happening sort of a thing, and the more the mainstream, I love the mainstream to cover it first. My channel is not for firsties. So we're gonna talk about BoJack Horseman. All right. That's what we're here to talk about. We're talking about BoJack Horseman. BoJack Horseman, okay? Remember that as I talk about BoJack Horseman, Season 5. So, I guess for those of you who haven't watched BoJack Horseman, would I recommend it? I guess we'll start with that review, and then I'll cut it off at a spoiler point. It is a dramatic comedy. Very much in the very dramatic comedy sense, in a very traditional comedy sense. In essence, it does have the happy mask, it does have the sad mask, and sometimes that sad mask hits really, really hard. If that's not the style of comedy for you, and you like more of the happy, silly mask, Buddy Thunderstruck might be a better show to watch for you if you like anthropomorphic animals and have a Netflix account and want to watch a show that portrays some form of comedy. Buddy Thunderstruck is a much more innocent, happy face sort of style comedy. BoJack Horseman is very much a reflection of life, slice of life, some sense of nihilism in there, sense of thing, right? So if you're not ready to deal with those particular things, it might not be for you. However, and this is just sort of like, this is not rigid advice, but I think art sometimes is, good art is a vaccine And what I mean by that is that when you're talking about hardships in life, you're gonna run into them eventually. There's no escaping it. Even if you make as you try as hard to make a funsy escapey fandom as you can, some things are going to come up in life that are going to hit you really hard. And interestingly enough, the weekend before this week, where the stuff that hits really hard kind of came up a bit, and I've been in this fandom a long time. This week has been one of the roughest, for sure. But I will say this: BoJack Horseman was a vaccine for it. And as I saw what was going on around me, I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I took that vaccine when I did. We'll get more into that a little bit later, I guess, or I don't know, I'll allude to it. That being said, don't binge watch it unless you have a really high tolerance for, that. Life's still going to hit hard, even if you are vaccinated, but it'll probably hit less hard than if you weren't vaccinated and weren't prepared for it. So it is, when dealing with those kind of, when dealing with life like that, then, it could kind of help, I guess. And that's kind of how that is cathartic in its own way. So, if you want to watch it, it's on Netflix. Now we're going to go into season 5 in a little bit more detail. So if you want to watch it and you don't want spoilers, I would recommend, stop watching the video right now. I'll see you again next week. Maybe we'll talk about some of the harder things, and maybe you'll be vaccinated by that time we talk about those things, if those things I need to talk about are going to be coming up. So just to be aware. That being said, season 5... The main premise of season 5 is BoJack Horseman's back. He's playing Filbert on the new television show for a social media platform thing called What Time Is It? Which is an amazingly prominent company that has an app that basically just tells you what time it is. That's kind of weird because it has like a big office with an impressive skyline and like a Big Ben-ish sort of styling to it. And it always was weird to me, but when I thought about it a little bit, it's like maybe it's like there's a theme in the season where it's taking note of the cycles in which abuse occurs. And because they occur in cycles, and even though time passes on, the characters themselves don't really change. Particularly when we're talking about the Halloween episode where Mr. Peanut Butter is bringing his new girlfriend to the Halloween party, and it shows like four different soulmates he was with going to that party at 4 different years, and they constantly have to reference, oh, this is the year 2003, this is the year 1999, this is the year 2018, we're back in the modern day. But the general premise is that the more things change, the more they stay the same, and in that sort of traditional sense. So when asking what time is it, when dealing with dark issues like the cycles of humanity and its ways of going through abuses, people generally ask what time it is. And I'll give you the profound example. On the internet, there's a phrase on social media called, "It's the year number. Why are we still dealing with this issue that should have been solved already?" You know what I mean? Like that sort of it's the year 2018. Why is racism still a thing? It's the year 2018. Why is homophobia still a thing? It's the year 2018. Why haven't we gotten over this thing yet? People are constantly asking, what time is it in other people, right? Because the things that they thought they had fixed aren't necessarily fixed, right? So I think that's sort of why what time it is sort of a prominent thing in it. But then again, I might be overanalyzing, and it actually just might be what's referred to by BoJack in a later episode, which we're going to talk about next, because it's probably the best one in the entire. the best one in the entire series, in my opinion, is it might be just a coffee cup that like a stage hand sort of left behind, and people are over analyzing it. So that episode is Free Churro. It's not Free Churro is very much an experiment. It seems like it's got a very artsy style going for it. It's not the first time that BoJack has done that. BoJack did that in one of the earlier seasons, where BoJack was going to visit a underwater city, basically, just off of Hollywood. And the premise is he's in this underwater suit, right? And he can't speak out of it. And he can't really hear too well either. So basically the episode goes along without dialogue. And every emotion, but it goes through a whole story arc and without dialogue. But it uses visuals, and it uses more emotive sounds in order to drive what the story it's talking about is going on. So the interesting thing is that it's basically like a more complicated Tom and Jerry-esque style, like as far as like dialogue goes. You imagine doing that and expanding it across like 30 minutes, or like, actually it's more like 25. But the interesting thing about that episode, the funny bit at the end is he runs into another land dweller who's down there in his own underwater thing. He presses the button on his neck and he goes, "Man, what are you doing?" And BoJack looks up, because that's the first dialogue you hear or something. I can't remember the exact words the guy said, but it was like the first dialogue you hear the whole episode. And he looks up and he sees that guy pushing the button, and then BoJack's like, he looks down, he pushes the button on his own. He's like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, the whole entire premise of the episode is ruined or the entire journey that he went through, bumbling journey, was kind of made moot, because the entire reason he couldn't talk to anybody and talk to anybody was because he couldn't figure out that he could talk to anybody the whole time by just pushing the button on his neck. Free Churro does a similar premise, but instead of being anti-dialogue, it is only dialogue. It's like you take that episode and you sort of reverse it. BoJack doesn't go anywhere. The episode is very stationary. He is at his mother's funeral. And the episode basically revolves around a 20-ish minute rambling dialogue of him at his funeral. And it's basically a comedy bit routine. It's basically a stand-up routine, a sort of an autobiographical stand-up routine that lasts for about 20 minutes. That explains the relationships with him and his mother, him and his long-past father. And it drives home a lot of character things, but it has a lot of clever things and ideas in it. And I don't know why. It took about half, when I was watching it the first time, it took about halfway through the episode before I realized, it's like, they've maintained this one shot the whole time, haven't they? They've maintained this one scene the whole time. And I looked down, I looked down at the time thing, and I'm like, they're halfway through. Are they going to do an entire episode in one room? Because to me, that was like, I was like, what? Because, like, in adult, you don't understand, like, in adult cartoons, particularly in the modern era, like, you're used to sort of this ADHD style, like, and not to, sort of underplay, actual attention hyperdeficit disorder, because it is an actual problem. But the issue is like, you're in one scene here, and then you got another scene here, and then you got another scene over here, and then, particularly like Family Guy, you know what I mean? I'm basically describing Family Guy here. What I'm trying to describe is, like, you have this one bit, and then this random one bit over here, and then cut back to this scene, and then we're back here, and then we're over here. So, like, it's a visual medium, so, like, a lot of things are jumbling around, and scenes jump from place to place. And it feels like they just, like, kicked out the entire, like, background department and every other voice actor on the show. And they're like, you take a vacation for now. We're just going to do a run recording of BoJack and go with that. And it was such a good episode that I actually watched it twice, which is usually very rare for me to do. I watched it twice because I'm writing a review for Flair at the same time, and so like I wanted to remember what was special about that episode and what was, and I sort of make little bits about that episode in that written form. I'll put the written form in the description below when it gets published, but. Basically, the one thing I found is that at the end of Free Churro, when he's doing this monologue about his mother and his funeral and making pot shots at her and doing all this funny stuff, the camera never removes itself from him and the pew, like the upper part of the church. You can see him, you can see the coffin, you can't see much else of the other room. You can't see much outside of that the entire episode. What ends up happening at the end, like the underwater episode, it does this whole subversive thing where it subverts the entire premise of the whole thing. The meandering journey he takes with his mouth this time to the audience is made moot when he goes over to the casket, which was closed the entire time. He opens it and he looks in, and then he pauses, and then he looks up and looks at his audience, and he finds out that they're lizard people, or they're chameleons. So they're reptiles. They're all reptiles. And he goes, "Am I in the right parlor? I just made this 20-minute rambling speech about my dead mother and how much I hated the way she treated me when I was like in a tongue-in-cheek manner, like hated how much she treated me, how she never saw me." And I just messed it up, and I just did this in the wrong parlor. One of the biggest emotional points of the whole 22-minute dialogue revolves around his mother's final words, which is, "I see you." He basically tries to interpret what those final words mean. He tries to derive meaning from it, sort of like the coffee cup that the fan tries to derive meaning out of. And he sort of mocks a little bit, but he also is like, "Oh man, like it's like, I see. What does that mean?" It's like, does she finally see me and like finally acknowledge that of the great things that I've done, and I see you, I acknowledge you, or is it sort of like, "I see you," as in like, I see all the things that you've done wrong and all the bad that you've done, and so is it a good "I see you" or a bad "I see you"? But he also notes when he's discussing his thing is that she's looking past him when she says that. She's not looking at the audience. She's not looking at Bojack. She's looking over here and going, "I see you," and not at Bojack. So Bojack's sort of like, she's being distant about it. So is she talking to me? But she's dying, so maybe she's just a little off. I don't know. Eventually, when he talks about 10 minutes after he rambles about that and goes off on other tangents about his show and things like that, he comes back to that and he goes, "When we were in the intensive care unit during her final moments," and then he goes, "Oh, I see you. She was reading the intensive care unit sign behind me." And what is interesting is that when I first had the end of that episode, when I first hit the end of that episode, it's interesting because it seems like there's parallels between Jack and his mother, Bojack and his mother, because the premise, the perversion of the premise at the end of the episode, where the audience is entirely chameleons, means that Bojack went on for 22 minutes and didn't see his audience. Like his mother on her deathbed, he was talking at an audience without seeing the audience, without seeing them. He was talking past them. He was looking beyond them. And during the emotional part of his speech, he's like, "I just wanted to be seen. I just, like, why can't people see me?" Like, he gets frustrated that his mother never saw him, and that, but at the same time, BoJack is not seeing the problem before him. He's not seeing the audience. He's not seeing those around him. So in essence, it's sort of like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But at least he got a free churro, right? So that's the kind of like... I just talked for like 10 minutes, probably, about an episode that lasts 25 minutes. And that's not even like the surface of it. So this is a very cerebral show. It's one of those ones where it's Insidious. It's like it's very simple on its surface, and you can laugh and you can sort of laugh at the tragedy of it and sort of enjoy it at the surface level. But when you go into a deep psychological dive, you can get pretty deep. And for someone who does that, like myself, it can be kind of tiring, which is why at the end of binging that thing for a weekend, I don't have a problem. It could have been like, oh, I didn't set up for doing my actual show this week, so I'm not going to do it, I guess. I should, like, take a nap, because my brain's still going. And going... Alright, so... I guess we just like to analyze shows because it's otherwise my life would be boring or something, or that's how people... I guess that's how people go about their day-to-day. Anyway, so yeah. But one of the biggest things about the idea of the cycle of abuse is that, like, BoJack starts to die, and during the season, BoJack starts to go down that road again. Particularly, it accelerates when he gets into a stunt accident and he starts taking opioids. And so he starts getting addicted to those things. And, along with, his increasing booze habit again. Eventually, this all comes to a head when he can't distinguish his part in Filbert from himself, and his real life and his artistic life start to blend in. The character in that starts to blend in. And if you think about it, the whole reason that Princess Carolyn pushed him into that role to begin with is because she saw she saw the character and she saw the modern way BoJack handles himself and goes, this is a good role for him because people know him as sort of a guy with a little bit of an edge to him. So this character's supposed to have a little bit of an edge to him, so this guy's perfect for you, right? So, interestingly enough, like, that, the character starts to blend a little too well with him, and during the flashpoint of the entire season where, like, the big thing kind of finally comes to a head is when we have an episode where his character and his self get mixed up, and he can't distinguish between the two anymore until the point where in one scene he's supposed to choke his co-partner, his co-star in the thing, but his co-star he's been having relations with outside of the thing, and outside of the roles, she's been trying to get him to cut back on the opioids and been trying to make sure that he's not, getting too deep into the drug thing again, and he starts to go a little nuts, and then all of a sudden you see him choking her, and he he's very violent about it on set until eventually it gets broken up, and, he finally is shocked into realizing it's like, oh gosh, I have a problem, right? So, at the end of that, and it's a very hard to watch scene because it drags on for really long. And I think that's the whole point is like, of all the it does the whole like quick, like blurring it back and forth, and then boom, solid on that scene, and it holds there for quite a bit of time. It's a very emotional scene. It's tough to deal with sometimes. But it's supposed to be tough, right? It's supposed to be like, this is the consequence for his behavior that escalated throughout the entire series. Or the entire season, I should say. So of course, BoJack now realizes, like, oh crap, I'm on this vicious cycle again, and I'm going back to, hurting others, and not just myself, because he doesn't care if he hurts himself. But as soon as he starts harming others through his actions, he starts to have a more like, oh crap, I gotta be more reflective about how I'm behaving. And so he goes to Diane. And Diane is this character that does like video blogs and things like that. So it's a character that sort of resonates with me because I do write news and bloggy type things, obviously, in my spare time. So her takeaway in this episode really resonated with me, particularly in the last week. Mainly because what happens is BoJack goes to her and says, you know, I'm not going to be, like, the general public doesn't realize that I was actually choking her. I was actually harming her because we played it off as this, like, oh, we're just acting and, you know, kind of a thing. But they both know they weren't. And, you know, people on set know they weren't. And the show is basically cut short on its second season because of it or something. I think that was happened. But basically, BoJack goes to Diane and goes, "No, I'm really reeling from what I did. I should be punished for what I did. You need to do what you do, Diane, and write a hit piece on me. Write a scathing report telling the world what I did and how it was wrong and how horrible it was. Because I'm dealing with this and it's really hard to deal with right now. I need to be punished." But Diane realizes something in that moment, and it's a big understanding that individuals who write nonfiction and write on social media, which is basically more and more people these days, it's a big takeaway and understanding like something like this. And it is sort of a thing. I don't know whether or not it's something to take into too much consideration, but what I took from it was Diane is like, no, I'm not going to do that. And the reason I think she said no here is she kind of explains a little bit why she says no. But sort of the takeaway is that she says no because she knows BoJack. And she knows how things work when things reach the public sphere, when somebody does something awful. And she realizes, BoJack, it doesn't matter, because if I write this hit piece on you and bring it out to the public sphere, the public is going to act like it normally does when somebody with a high profile, when somebody with a high profile has a hit piece run on them. There's going to be some people calling for their heads. There's going to be some people defending them to the death. And you're going to go, well, and if you address it and try to go, oh, I'm going to repent and do what I do, you're going to do what you do. Because BoJack's been on this dog and pony show before. And as I was writing my Flair article and using that turn of phrase, I realized, and I face-palmed myself, and I'm like, wait, this is literally a dog and pony show. This is BoJack and Mr. Peanut Butter. This is a dog and a pony show. I don't think that's coincidence, and congratulations to the writers, because it completely didn't slip my mind until just now. It's like, a dog and a pony show. I get it. For those of you who don't know what that means, dog and pony show is a turn of phrase where it's basically a facade. Like it's a show, but it's sort of like a facade of a show. Like people are putting on a front to hide something about themselves. So, like literally, BoJack Horseman is a dog and pony show. That's, I guess, if I had to do a 30-second elevator explanation of what BoJack Horseman is, it's a dog and pony show about a dog and pony. It's a dog and pony show where there's a dog and a pony, right? Is this a crossover episode? But anyways, what she realizes is that BoJack Horseman has been on this dog and pony show before. He's had to reveal himself to the general public. There's some catharsis in him. He restores himself a little bit. But he doesn't really restore himself. He restores himself in the public eye. And there's a difference between restoring yourself in the public eye and actually restoring yourself. Because you know what you do in the privacy of your own home. You know what you do when you are put alone with somebody who's vulnerable and somebody who may not know any better, or maybe an animal that doesn't have any cognition. I might be going a little bit too much on a tangent, so I'll stop right there. You know what you do in the privacy of your own sphere. The general public sees something different. It is much different to have redemption in the public sphere than it does to have redemption in the private, the redemption of yourself. And what Diane realizes is that when the press, when people like herself, or maybe even myself, do these pieces where we, talk about these concepts that are things, if we put someone's name on it, it makes it too personal. And either A, they double down on who they are, or B, if they don't do that and they do the redemption thing, they'll redeem themselves in the public eye, but maybe not actually redeem what their bad qualities that they would want to fix about themselves and themselves. It is up to the individual themselves to fix themselves. The people who write news and the people who write things cannot babysit other people 24/7, and it shouldn't be their job to babysit people 24/7. We should just be sharing information about the world around us, and maybe information that will help people make it a little bit better, but not like always dealing with people that are pushing people at their worst moments. And it's something that I certainly take into consideration. It's something I kind of always a little bit took into consideration. I never, as much as like I've sometimes dabbled in the other side, I suppose. But at the end of the day, it is something for me to take into consideration when she's saying that, because in the end, it is up to Bojack to fix Bojack. It's not up to for Diane to tell the general public that Bojack is broken, and then Bojack, as an actor, as somebody who can act, is going to go out to the general public and go, well, I'm fixed. Oh, I'm going to have to convince you that I'm going to change for the better. And he's an actor. He can do that. He can play that role. He can play that arc. He can play the redemption arc. People who are performance artists can perform to pretend that they redeem themselves. And when Bojack is basically telling Diane to pull the trigger, he's basically going, put it in the public spheres so I can have it out there and have my naked body out there, which is something that was another part of another episode. I have my naked body thrown out there for people to see the nakedness of my sins so that I can redeem myself in the public. And by the way, interestingly enough, when he does that, he's going against the wishes of his co-star, because his co-star, who he ended up strangling, was on public television. She goes, you don't tell anybody that actually happened, because I don't want, my career is advancing, and I don't want my career to be in your shadow. And making that scene about you and strangling me and things like that, the attention of what I did on that show is going to be drawn to your actions. So Bojack, when he goes to Diane, is actually being sort of a jerk, right? Because he's going against the wishes of the person he just assaulted. Even though, like, some people, it is sort of a messy situation. So, at the end of the day, it's interesting because But anyways, so if you watched BoJack season 5? What did you think about it? I think that, as I said, the timing of me watching it was very interesting, and certainly was sort of a vaccination that I needed in order to deal with certain situations that have occurred in the fandom over the past week. I will say this: I've been in this fandom for 2 decades now. What happened this last week is probably one of the hardest weeks, because it wasn't only just this one thing. There were other things going on, not only in the furry YouTube space, but in like the furry writing space. There's a lot of like Emperor has no clothes moments, and interestingly enough, I just finished binge watching BoJack, and then all that stuff happens, and it's like, huh, wasn't that interesting? But yeah. So, as Diane said to BoJack, I can't make a hit piece that's going to make somebody change their mind on what they do and who they are and how to fix themselves. We can't be babysitting. We're grown people, right? Most of us are grown adults. Some of us are younger, and to those younger people in the fandom, welcome. To younger people in the fandom, be aware there are individuals in this fandom that might take advantage, and you should be in the accompaniment of an adult until you have the wherewithal to have the ability to recognize when adults are using their skills that they've acquired over their time on this planet in order to take advantage. And you should always you should have people you trust, right? You should have people that you can trust, because there are individuals who will put you into groups that'll try to lure you into groups that are not in your best interest, that are very in the moment and won't last over the period of time, because they just want to make you look like a fool for their own amusement, or they want to use you for other reasons. And there are people out there who, when trusted in the position over those who have less power than them, they'll take advantage of those who have less power than them. And interestingly, that cycle of abuse, when the government does it, it's kind of funny that some people who are like that is they're paranoid about the government abusing power, but there are individuals who are paranoid about the government abusing power that abuse power themselves when they deal with people with less power than them. And that's always the biggest head scratcher for me. Or maybe it makes the most sense, because it's maybe they're afraid that the people in power are too much like themselves. I don't know. But that's going into some other philosophy that's not BoJack related, I suppose. But in some ways it is. BoJack was trusted by a family in New Mexico to be part of the family, and to not bring down he could have stopped being BoJack, right? He could have done that. He could have tried really hard to not be that, but he couldn't stop being BoJack. And eventually he was told, you gotta leave. And before he left, he almost took advantage of the daughter of his old love interest. And even though the daughter was the one instigating it, right? But she's not supposed to know any better, right? Because she's younger. And so the adult in the room is supposed to know. It's no, that's not okay. And, is supposed to, at the very least, tell her mother that her daughter's been doing that, right? Go to her mother and go, your daughter has been making passes at me. Could you tell her to stop? And, get with her and tell her that this is not okay. Because if he was proactive and did that, then the whole thing would have been a little bit better, because she would have been oh, he's coming forward to me and telling me this because he doesn't want her daughter to get hurt, whether it's with him or somebody else, right? But as it's come to light, it's there are certain individuals who we're human beings on this planet, and as that we have cognitive functions, and the other creatures on this planet don't. And so when we're taking advantage of stimuli within creatures that don't have the cognitive functions that we have, for our own ends, it's disturbing, it's disgusting, and it's not okay. Especially when it's to the part of in any case, it's not okay. The fact that it would do more damage with harming him in a physical manner, even beyond that, is just no. It's no. But time will tell on that. It was a hard week. It was a hard week for people in the fandom, and including myself. And we didn't even get a free frickin' churro for it. Anyways, if I guess BoJack, it got a little too real at the end there. But Anyways, thank you very much for watching. If you want to subscribe, you may. We'll cover more furry news and topics next week. I'll see if I can record 2 episodes and have like a filler episode, because I'm not going to be here to record a timely episode 2 weeks from now, because I'll be going to a gathering in Ohio. But anyways, thank you very much for watching. Have a good one. And I hope to see you again next time. And hopefully it'll be it probably won't be a brighter topic. I'm lying to myself. But my body functions will put in interjections that are involuntary that'll make things a little more zany. Thanks, body. Thanks for that burp. Everyone needed that. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. Have a good one. And try to have a good one.